Socrates, ancient Greek philosopher, and boy, one of the greatest philosophers of all times. As a matter of fact, many of the great philosophers in history, they consider Socrates the most important, influential philosopher of all times. Socrates is famous, among other things, for saying, an unexamined life is not worth living. Now, think about that one for a moment. Because according to Socrates, if you are living an unexamined life, you're living a worthless life. Now, what does that even mean, right? Living an examined or unexamined life. Well, it means knowing yourself, which is another thing Socrates is famous for. He used to encourage not encourage, exhort his followers with the statement, know thyself. He would tell them constantly, because that's the goal of examining oneself, that we end up fully, completely being able to understand and know who we are. Now, how do we achieve that? How do we go from examining oneself to knowing oneself? Well, the process of examining oneself, it's one in which you ask yourself this important why philosophical questions we talked about in the previous video. Do you remember I said the why question is the philosophical question, because when we ask the why question, and when we ask it philosophically, okay, because there's another way, the non-philosophical way of asking the why question, but the philosophical way is when we are dealing with a problem. We are stuck in a situation that it's difficult, that it's painful, that it's annoying, and it's definitely something that it's affecting the quality of our lives, and we're not happy. So we ask ourselves, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Now, when we ask this why question with this mindset, we feel like we have this problem that we need to fix, we need to find the answer to, the solution to, and it's personal, it's serious, like, because we know how much it is affecting, the problem is affecting our lives and our minds. We are intent on finding the answer, whatever it takes. So you see what I'm saying? Like, it's we ask the why question philosophically when we have that attitude. Like, we won't rest until we find the answer. And we inquire and we dig and we dig and we dig and we keep asking questions after questions until we get at the very bottom of the issue. Friends, when you have this attitude while asking yourself a why question, I can guarantee it, you will find the answer. You will find the answers you're looking for. You will. You know, one of the things that we philosophers believe strongly is that the answer to the most important why questions are always found within ourselves. So if we develop the habit of examining ourselves this way, asking the why question philosophically, not um, like children who, whine to their parents with the why question, right? Like, why, mom? Why? Okay, obviously, that's not the right philosophical way of asking the why question, because children, they're not after, they're not seeking for wisdom, or they're not trying to understand a situation. They're not trying to learn anything. They're just whining. But again, when you ask yourself the why question the philosophical way, when it's personal and you are committed to not rest until you find the answer, friends, you will find the answer. And when that happens, and this is the really cool part, when you do find the answer you're looking for, there's going to be growth in your life. there's going to be improvement. And this is true. Like, let's use an example or a couple of them. Let's say you have a reputation for, you're known for always making the same mistake, right? Over and over again. And again, you have a reputation for it. I don't know if you've been there, but I have. And I've known many people who have had the same problem. We're known for always making the same mistake. If that's you, if you stop one day and ask yourself seriously, philosophically, why do I always make the same mistake? And by philosophically, you already know what I mean. You have the attitude of, okay, I'm going to get at the very bottom of this issue. Like, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to pay really, really close attention, and I'm going to examine everything. If you have this attitude, you're going to start, your attention is going to become high resolution, meaning you're going to be aware of things that you probably never paid attention to. For example, be you might consider your attitude every time you approach this situation in which you make the mistake, right? You're going to examine that. You're going to say, why do I always have this attitude, these expectations every time I enter this scenario? You're going to probably question your assumptions. What am I assuming every time I act this way? You're probably going to consider things in the environment, maybe people involved, or variables in the environment, the situation that probably have something to do with your mistake, with your making the same mistake. So I got to tell you, friends, when you start looking at this problem this way, you're going to begin to see, oh, I see, I never paid attention to this before, but maybe my problem is one of assumptions that I make, or an attitude that I have, or or whatever. Maybe I'm in a rush every time I approach this situation, and being a rush does not allow me to see clearly. Now that I'm reflecting and I'm considering this scenario, I can see more clearly. Long story short, friends, you will you will know why you're making the same mistake in that particular scenario. And when that happens, when you finally understand why, well, guess what? You won't make the same mistake again. And that translates into improvement in your life, growth, knowing that, okay, the next time you approach the same situation, you won't approach it the same way with the same assumptions, knowing that that way always leads to bad results. Okay, you're going to try something different. And then if the second approach does not work, you're going to do the analysis and you're going to try a different approach till you find the right one. At least you won't persist on making the same mistake, on approaching the situation the same way, because you know it's not going to work, and you know why. Now tell me if that's not improvement. Let's think about something more concrete. Friends, for example. Okay, excuse me. It's not tea this time, it's coffee. Um, let's consider friends. Have you stopped to think about your friends, and have you asked yourself, why do I always hang out with these friends? Why do I like these friends so much? What's about them that I find appealing, interesting, or enjoyable, amusing? What's the value I see in them? What benefits do this relationship I have with them brings me? When you start this way of analysis, in regards to your friends, you're going to begin seeing a lot of things that you probably didn't consider before. You're going to see the goods and not so goods in your friends, and you're going to probably going to start to, put those things in a balance, and evaluate your friends, your relationship with these people. You know what's going to happen as a result? You're going to get better at recognizing good and not so good friends. You're going to get better at choosing your friends. And you're going to know what friends actually add something positive and meaningful to you. Now, you might think I'm being very cold in my analysis of friends, right? And friends is something like, friends are people we should just accept, the way they are, period, because, we probably have the same expectations from them, right? That they would accept us the way we are. Why do we have to settle? That's another why question. Why do we have to settle with that kind of approach to friends? Why not asking those questions? What what benefits do I get from my relationship with these people? What is valuable in this relationship, and why, if you can, identify the value of the relationship, man, that's a big one, because then you can ask yourself, why is this element valuable to me? Where's the value really? Okay, I hope you don't see this as asking a bunch of weird questions. But trust me, friends, when your attitude is one of, gosh, I want to know, I want to learn, like this is serious for me, like I want to get at the bottom of the issue. I really want to understand myself fully, and why I do everything, why I do the things I do, why I believe in the things I do. If you apply this analysis to everything in your life, boy, the potential for growth, it's going to be unlimited. Unlimited. So I hope you're beginning to see the point in Socrates' statement. An unexamined life is not worth living. Of course, because think about the opposite. If you do live an examined life, if you are the kind of person who makes this analysis habitually, you ask yourself why before making any decision. Think about the once again the potential for improvement. Think about how much better your life is going to be, because it will be better. The more you know, the better your life is going to be. Now, do you remember, we're trying to answer a question here that we asked ourselves at the end of the first video. The question was, well, the problem first, to offer a short summary. Um, the problem of existence is life is difficult. And it's difficult because we lack information about life. And we do not know how to make sense of life. According to Sabato, we will get this knowledge, this wisdom, much later in life. And the question we asked was, why? Why do we have to wait so long for us to get this knowledge? What's keeping us from getting this knowledge, this wisdom now? And the answer Socrates is offering is, well, you don't have access to this knowledge because you don't examine yourself. And that's why your life feels so difficult and overwhelming. And if you think about it, friends, elderly people, people who are retired, and people who have plenty of time, you know what they do with that time? They think, they reflect about their past, their choices, their life trajectory, and because they have the time to do it, right? And then because they do, they start drawing important conclusions about their lives and about life and existence in general. So of course, they attain that wisdom, which is in part why many people who are elderly, they love to talk, right? Of course, there's always exceptions, but I would say perhaps most people, if not most people, many elderly people for sure, they love to talk. They love to meet somebody and start, have a conversation because they're so excited about all this wisdom that they all of a sudden found during this um, elderly years, let's say, and they want to share that. So imagine once again the potential for growth in your life, how much better your life can be if you develop the habit of examining yourself like completely for everything you do and everything you believe in, everything you consider important in your life. You might start doing the analysis right now. Ask yourself, what is really important in your life? And once you have an answer, once you have a list, let's say of the 5 most important things in your life, then ask yourself, why are those things important to you? What value do they have? What do they add to your life? That it's meaningful, that it's once again valuable. Imagine, friends, having the answers to those questions. Well, it is unfortunate. It is actually quite sad that most people don't know themselves. Like they don't. Recently, I met an elderly gentleman at a grocery store, right? And we were both like shopping and paying for our groceries. And he made a comment about how much more expensive everything is right now. And then I replied, with a comment about inflation. And then we started talking, right, about, the situation in the country and the economy and that sort of thing. And I started paying attention to his words. And he would mention the Lord, right, often. Oh, the Lord this, and oh, the Lord that. And then at some point he quote a biblical passage. And so it became obvious to me that he was a Christian. And so I asked him, I said, are you a Christian? And he said, oh, yes, yes. He was happy to be asked that question. But then I asked, can I ask you why? Why are you a Christian? And he did not know how to answer. He was like, what do you mean? I said, well, I said, very respectfully, right? I said, well, it's interesting to me that, there's so many different religions and there's agnostic people. Why are you Christian? Why aren't you an agnostic, for example? And he said to me, well, I was born in a Christian home. My parents were both Christians, God-fearing people. That's the way he put it. And they took me to church since I was born, me and my sister, and so we grew up in church, and I love church, and I love my Bible, and I love to pray, and all that good stuff. And then I said, well, I said that's really interesting because I said if you think about it, if you had been born, if your parents had been Muslims, and if they had taken you to a mosque instead of church, and if they had taught you the Quran instead of the Bible, then you'd be a Muslim. And boy, he didn't like that question. That was pretty much the end of the conversation. He didn't like it one bit because, of course, I made him feel like his faith was something circumstantial. He could have been anything. He could have been an agnostic. He could have been a Muslim. Why don't you ask yourself the same question? If you're a believer, why are you a believer? Why do you believe in God? If you're an agnostic, why are you an agnostic? What are your reasons? What is your justification for your agnosticism? Have you done your research? Would you be able to articulate an answer? Um, once again, a justification for why you're an agnostic. If people, ask you for a justification with the question, why are you an agnostic? Would you be able to give them a satisfactory answer, well thought out, well articulated answer? Well, this gentleman, obviously, he couldn't do it, and he was unhappy. Now, I wasn't trying to, you know, picking on him or anything or make him upset, but I understand why people get upset. And because I ask myself that why question. Why do people get upset, when I ask these questions? And people get upset because nobody likes to feel exposed or feel like their ignorance is exposed. Nobody wants to be put in this on the spot that way. Be seen as an ignorant, like you don't really know a thing about what you're talking about, right? No, nobody likes that. And you know what's funny? Socrates, our friend here, Socrates was sentenced to death in part because he did the exact same thing. He would go around Athens looking for people, looking to start a conversation, only to have an opportunity to ask the person all these why questions. And Socrates would particularly look for people who claim to know a lot about a subject. Okay. And he, for example, he would meet somebody who claimed to know a lot about the gods, and Socrates would get so excited, right? Oh, you know a lot about the gods. That's great. You're the person I was looking for because I have so many questions. And then Socrates would start the why questions. So why do the gods exist? Why do you believe in God? And he would start digging and digging and digging. And you know what, friends? At some point in the conversation, people would start getting really, really uncomfortable and upset because little by little, Socrates was exposing their ignorance. He was showing them that they really had no idea what they were talking about, that their knowledge, their wisdom rested on nothing. They had no solid, reliable foundation for their beliefs. It was all a bunch of assumptions. And and of course, people would be really upset. And because Socrates, um, he was actually not trying to annoy people, right? Though, even though he was many people, especially many important people in Athens, influential people in politics, found him pretty annoying. He was actually trying to enlighten people about themselves. Once again, Socrates is famous for using that exhortation, know thyself, because he saw how not just misguided but lost people were. And even, and particularly people who claim to know, to be expert, on some topics, they had no clue. And he was quite concerned about it. He made it his mission in life, right, to go around Athens and engaging people in conversations to let them know that they had no idea who they were, that they never really understood the process of examining oneself. So, and because he gained a lot of enemies, important enemies, he was sentenced to death. But he was fine. He was fine because he knew why. He had a why for his life. And he was pretty aware that those would be some of the difficulties he would deal with. And he was fine. He was dealing with it. He was willing to deal with those obstacles, even being sentenced to death. So once again, I hope you see right now the value in the statement, how important it is to know ourselves. I just one last story before we finish our video. I'm reminded of a student that I had about a couple of years ago. in my philosophy class, we were talking about Socrates, and we were addressing this statement right in class. And this particular student, he was quite cynic about the whole idea of examining oneself. And he was like, he said in class, "Well, that's silly. If everybody knows themselves." And I heard him, right? And I said, what do you say? You think everybody knows themselves? He said, "Of course." I said, "Well, let's not speak for everybody else. Let's just speak for yourself." I said, "Do you think you know everything there is to know about yourself?" And he said, "Of course." Okay. So I said, "Well, answer this one question for me then. Okay, please tell me or tell us, here, to me and your classmates, who are you?" And the student looked at me like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you know a lot about yourself, right? Well, tell us, who are you?" And it was just funny, just looking at this young man just struggling to find an answer. And he said, what did he say? Oh, he said, "Oh, I'm a college student," he said. First thing that came to his mind, I'm sure. He said, "I'm a college student." And I said, "Well," I said, "take a look around. You are surrounded by 20 other college students. So does that mean that you and them are the same?" And then I asked his classmates, do you guys share like the same identity? And they were like, and so I said to the young man, I said, "Listen, you have to be more specific about your answer and telling me who you are, because it's obvious to me that you're not them, that you're your own person. Am I right?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, yeah." "So then tell me, what makes you different from everybody else? What makes you unique, right?" And he thought for a moment and he said, "Well, I have unique experiences," he said. And I replied, "Well, that's a good point," I said, "because it's true. Everybody has unique experiences. And for example, everybody has a unique set of parents, right? And a unique upbringing and that sort of thing." But I said, "Okay, but I insist," I said, "you have to be a bit more specific. So answer this question for me then. Tell me about one unique experience that you've had that defined you, that made you the person you are." Because I can tell you easily eight moments, experiences that I had in my life, 8 days, 8 events that totally changed me and totally defined me, made me the person I am today. And I can tell you why they define me. So tell me about just one experience, I said, that defined you, and tell me why it defined you and how it defined you. Crickets. This time I got no answer. He had nothing to say. What about you? Can you look back in your life and think of key moments in your past that defined you, that made you the person you are? Let's say three, four different events, let's say, come to your mind right now. You're thinking about 3, 4 days, important things happen in your life. Do you know how those days defined you, how they changed you, and why? Would you be able to tell me who you were before those days and who you became afterwards? Now you might think, wow, that's a lot of thinking. Well, but yeah, it's work, right? Now let's um let's finish this video with another why question. Okay? In the first video, we learned that, okay, life is difficult, and it's difficult because we don't have the right knowledge, wisdom that help us make sense of life and navigate through life. Okay, and we ask why. Why it takes so long for us to get this knowledge? What's keeping us from getting this knowledge now? The answer Socrates gives us here is because we don't examine ourselves. And that's why our lives are difficult. That's why your life sucks, right? That's another way to put it. Well, because you don't do the examining. You don't know yourself. You don't know who you are. You don't know a thing about your own beliefs and what's important to you. Okay, so this is the why question we're going to ask to finish this video. Why don't people examine themselves? Why don't people have the habit of examining themselves? And it's quite ironic, right? That we should know more about ourselves than anybody, right? We have the best insight into our own lives. But again, the reality is most people by far they don't know. They don't know themselves that well. So why? Why don't we have the habit of examining ourselves and knowing ourselves like really, really well? Why? We're going to find the answer in the next video.